We're live.
We are?
Yep.
Hi, folks. Welcome. This is November 28th. And happy to have you here. This is our question and answer. Tonight's theme is hand planing. Got lots of stuff to give away tonight. This is all part of our Purple Heart Project fundraising. And I'm going to slowly introduce everybody and everything that's happening. Got a lot of news for you. But let's start right off the bat. Question, Frick.
No, I'm not ready for questions. I don't have any questions.
You don't?
No, I'm waiting.
Oh, Luther hasn't got them?
Well, it's not his fault either.
It's our case. So let me mention this. This week in the mail, we got this present from Keith Cole out in Battle Creek, Michigan, right? Yeah. And he had, if you watched any of the other previous ones, he sent us a massive shaker box. In case you don't know how these are made, so this would have been called shaker Tupperware. It's a thin hardwood band that is heated in water, wrapped around a mold, dried, and then pinned or secured with little copper rivets, and then a solid wood bottom and top, and the lid just where they kept stuff. Anyway, the one he sent us was huge. We auctioned it off, and a very generous individual bought it and sent it to Danny, didn't they? Danny Bell down in Tennessee. Well, my wife really liked it. We held on to it for a couple of weeks, but then we let it go. So anyway, Keith just sent this. So this is bird's eye. No, this is maple with a cherry top, and inside, northern white pine on the bottom. Inside is a number, pardon me, this is a number, what number is this? I should have my glasses on.
Number 4.
It's a number 4 shaker box. Then inside is a bird's eye maple top, maple sides, pine bottom, and this is a number 3 shaker box. Inside with sycamore top, pine on the bottom, maple on the sides, is a number 2 shaker box, and inside that with sycamore on the top and pine on the bottom is a number 1 shaker box, and inside that with cherry on the top and cherry on the bottom is a number 0 shaker box. Aren't they cool? Thank you very much. My wife loved it. Thought it was so cute. I never liked the word cute when someone described my woodwork, but I suppose in this case it applies. So that was a very nice gesture on your behalf, and we will display it proudly in our home. Actually, we might actually use them. All right, now what else am I supposed to remember? I got to say, Angie and Lynn are on, I assume. Ange, how are you? Angie is part of our team. Here's her picture right here. Angie does all of the, she and her sister Lynn do all the packaging of our T-shirts. She's Ken's cousin. And these are our T-shirts to help raise awareness of our Purple Heart Project. They've got a nice logo on the front. And then on the back, there's 3 different themes, more coming. Wood is good, wood for good, wood is good, and wood doing good. So if you order one of those T-shirts, you'll get it all nicely packaged, sealed, Angie's signature on there. Beautiful. Now, I'm dying of the heat. So, here's a little word to the wise. I got to put a big shout out to Moose, who's a good friend of ours, who has a stall in the city, the old city market in St. John. And he donates stuff every month, or every time we do this, that we auction off. So tonight we're auctioning off the cat sweater. I have to be careful. The captain's hoodie says the captain is always right. And if you look real closely on the side of the hood, it says, and I'm the captain. And then Frick's favorite, the Naughty Girl T-shirt, and that has a history in all of itself. Anyway, so last Saturday, 2 Saturday nights ago, we were all done, and everybody had gone, and I was just cleaning up, and the place was kind of cool because we turned the furnace off so it's not so noisy when we broadcast. And I was a little chilled, and there was one of these cat sweaters sitting over there, and it was an extra large, and I said, well, that'll fit, so I tried it on. It is the most comfortable, the warmest thing I think I've ever had on. I bought one for my wife. She wears it to bed. These are awesome. So if your wife or anybody in your family is chilled, or tends to be the type that is chilled, go to Pat's Secret Garden. Maybe Frank will put a link in there.
It's already there.
And grab one of these because it's light, but it is warm. It is. I can't say enough about it. I wear it to. I wear it around town, and I just tell people, I said, "This is incredible." Now I want to show you this. So, in case you're unaware,
Microphone.
sorry, thank you. In case you're unaware,
Wait, just wait. Put the apron on and then attach that to the apron.
no, got to do it. Well, all right. Several years ago, when we first started the Purple Heart Project, Colonel Luther got this idea of getting a patch. So if you're not military type, everyone that's in the military has a patch that identifies their what?
It's got to go down all the way.
Identifies their squad. No, not squad. Somebody help me out with terminology.
Is it
Anyway.
no, not faction.
No, that they belong to. And so what they would do, here's my last one.
Is it branch?
No.
Platoon.
Platoon.
Battalion.
Battalion sounds right. So if they came to our class as one of the combat wounded vets, so our Purple Heart Project is where 6 times a year, next year 7, we bring in 7 combat wounded veterans from all over the world, Australia, England, Canada, United States, to name a few. And we treat them to a 6-day, very intense hand tool workshop. Unit. Somebody said that? Thank you. Perfect. Hand tool workshop, 6 days long. We start at 8 in the morning. We go until 11 at night. They learn how to sharpen. They learn how to cut dovetails, mortise and tenon, just about everything you need to know in order to build a piece of wooden furniture. And of course, we provide their transportation, airfare, hotel, meals, and each vet gets about $3,500 worth of premium tools that they get to use that week and they take home as theirs. We also now have a program that provides them with a bench. I'll talk about that a little bit about that later. But as a memento, the patch is put on my apron. They sign them on the back so we'll know who they are. And at the beginning of the next class, this one, the apron strings get cut and it goes up on the wall with their pictures. So this always represents 2 classes. But this one's really tattered because, of course, we weren't able to have any classes this past year, so this one had a little longer lifespan than normal. But my patches I've been sewing them back on, and this one is time to get on the wall. So over the years, I've had numerous police, first responders, other vets who weren't in the class but wanted to send me their patch. So I decided to take one of our new aprons, which we now have available, and sew all of those patches we've had onto this apron. So if you are one of the ones that have sent me one of these, would you kindly get a hold of me? OPP stands for Ontario Provincial Police.
I'm down.
Hi.
Nothing.
Send me a little note so we can put your name on the back side of this. So we'll wear this until we're able to get our first class of vets back in. Okay.
We got questions.
Questions. Let's go. Don't let me forget to come back to.
First one comes from Bill.
Oh, by the way, I hope all of our Americans had happy Thanksgiving and that you're enjoying a cold turkey sandwich, which I love. Go ahead.
All right, Bill Killian.
Hey, Bill.
From Meridian, Idaho. He says, how do you set the frog on your initial use for the new hand plane like the 5.5?
Okay, so just so happens that I haven't. First thing you need to do is get a plane adjust star. You'll want to replace that. Best invention for a hand plane since hand planes were invented, maybe. So this is the frog. And the purpose of the frog, I'm going to hit this with the assumption that you guys don't understand the terminology of the parts, so pardon me if you do, but I'm sure somebody doesn't. The frog, its purpose, what?
I would just make sure that you stay very close to the original question so that you don't spoil a question that could be asked in the future.
All right.
Ask
the question again, please.
You don't want to give away the cow on the first.
Oh, okay. All right. I'll take Jake's advice. I'll just answer the question, and if there was some background information that somebody didn't understand, I'm going to leave it up to you to ask it. So ask that again for me, please, Frick. And how's lunch, dinner?
Delicious. Chicken pot pie from Costco.
A little plug there.
Best chicken pot pie there is. That's not homemade. Okay. Uh-oh. Oh, there we are. How do you set the excuse me? How do you set the frog on your initial use for a new hand plane like a 5.5?
Okay, so you probably don't have to do anything because the frog is probably going to come somewhere in the middle of the road. By that I mean this thing right here called the frog that supports the blade can either be moved forward to close down that aperture or throat or pulled back to leave it open. The only time you want the throat closed down tight is when you're dealing with figured wood. And under those circumstances, you want it so tight that it's just able to get a shaving up through there and no more. So I will put this together and just give you some example or an example of where it would normally be set. It's called the lever cap. See how easily I'm able to do that? If you what?
They want to know when it's going to be back in stock.
Oh.
So do we.
Yeah, we got them. They're coming. They're coming. We're selling them literally faster than they can be made. So, Jake, what happened here? Did you you put that on? You took it off of here, right? Is this the same blade?
Oh, you had been playing around with that. You took it apart. I just sharpened it.
Where's my regular screwdriver?
There's one.
Huh?
I don't know. Just grab that screwdriver. Right there.
Well, it's not. I don't want that one. I want my
Sure, but I don't know where it is.
changing of aprons. So I want the yoke to be pretty much sticking, perpendicular to the surface, and we'll say that's the middle of the road spot. So we'll put that in there. This throat is down tight.
It's not sitting flat.
Yeah, I realize that. So what I'm doing right now is I just loosened the 2 outside frog retaining screws. There's 3 screws back here. And then I'm going to retract by turning the center screw counterclockwise. That'll pull the frog back and that'll give me a larger opening down there. Once I get it where I want it, I'll tighten the outside frog retaining screws. And what that does is that tightens the frog so it can't move. The whole idea is you do not want to have any vibration in the plane anywhere in order to get good performance. So with the blade, or with the plane sitting up against a light colored background, now that I've got my blade sticking out, I'm going to retract it. And this is what I mean by so easy. I'm going to use my lateral adjustment lever to get it parallel to the sole. I'll retract it a little bit more. Okay, so I just would be getting a shaving right there. And there's how much of an opening I have. So I'll put a white background behind it. Can you see it?
Well, yes. Can you give us an arbitrary measurement?
Yeah. Is how much that is?
Yes.
Well, if you had, here's your best example. What's the thickest shaving you're going to pull? I can't imagine you pulling a shaving even a 1/16. So as long as your opening is more than a 1/16 of an inch, then you're going to be fine. The only time this bears any importance is when you're dealing with, if you're planing a piece of wood like this, and you want to control any tear out so that that surface comes off perfectly smooth, then you've got to close that throat down, go through that operation I just did, so that that gap that you just saw as being more than a 1/16 is now just barely the thickness of the shaving. And that provides tremendous support directly ahead of the cutting edge, pressing down on the wood fiber so that if there's an area where it starts to oppose the direction of the plane and it wants to lift up and tear, it can't, because this part of the sole is pressing down on it, holding it in place. Okay, good. I don't mind being coached. Go ahead, Frick.
All right, next question comes from Wally Cox in Monticello, Indiana.
Hey, Wally.
He says, could you go into much detail about how to keep from having plane tracks during the finishing prep on boards, from corner blade sharpening to the process of drawing the plane blade back during the final
What are you
planing?
shaking your head about?
Well, he's requesting that you go into great detail However, sharpening, we cover sharpening in a YouTube video. What you can talk about is removing plane tracks on the finishing the surface.
I should have the camera. Okay, well, I'll say this. Of all the times I've gone out and taught, plane tracks are a huge issue that almost everybody has. And I would say 95% of the time, and this part surprises me, 95% of the time, thank you, Ken, when I pick up their plane and look down it, I've got blade. I'm sitting there looking at it, and I've got blade sticking up like this. One corner sticking way out like that, and I'm thinking, dude, do you not see the blade? So what you have to first be able to do is learn to identify where the blade is. So if I'm looking straight down the sole, I don't see anything. So what I have to do is drop the front of this plane down just a little bit. So now as I look at the sole, it's about a 1/2 inch wide, right? From here to where I see it back here, there's about a 1/2 inch this way. And that allows me to just start to see the throat right here. Now, Jake, can you come over my shoulder?
Yeah, I don't know how much I can see, though.
Well, try it.
I know.
Tell me when. I got to stay here.
You've got to bring it. Well, I can't go up any higher.
So what?
You need to drop down. Lower. Lower.
Lower? Bring me under the bench?
Lower.
I can't go lower?
Well.
You're looking down here, right?
Yes.
Okay, now I got to be able to see too. So what can you see right now?
The sole.
Can you see the blade?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna move the blade. You see the blade moving?
Yeah.
Side to side?
Yeah.
So I would come down and inspect their plane, and that's what I would see. Well, what is that going to produce? Well, obviously it's going to produce this heavy cut on the right side that's going to leave a huge gouge, because as you move the plane over to take another pass, you've got a gouge that's this deep, and you're trying to remove it with a blade that's only projecting about a fraction of that over on this side. So 95% of the time, the issue is the blade is not parallel to the sole. Not a problem with doing the corners, although that creeps in once in a while, but the blade is not parallel to the sole. So you have to be able to look at it and identify it. Now I'm going to go through how I do it. So I've just sharpened the blade. I put it back in the plane. I've got everything set up. I advance the blade until I see it. And at this point, with it's sticking out farther out than I would have it when I'm using it, I would then adjust with my lateral adjustment lever. That's this thing that's underneath the blade. And if the blade is high on my left, I'm going to push the lateral adjustment lever to my left. And that will cause it to pivot like this, pulling the left side in and putting the right side out. Okay, now that appears, based on my looking at it, to be parallel. The blade is parallel to the sole. I see the same amount on the right, middle, and left. So I'm going to retract it. That means I'm going to turn my adjustar in a counterclockwise rotation to pull the blade in. Now, that's working on the assumption that when I start planing, that blade is going to stay perfectly in line. It's not, but it's going to be close. Okay, so with the blade all the way in, let me get something easy to deal with first. We'll use this piece of yellow cedar that I absconded from Ken the other day. Ken and Jake set up the planes, and they decide to use $100 piece of yellow cedar to test the planes on. I had to draw the line somewhere.
Well, only the finest for our customers.
It's just because they like the smell. A little bit of wax. So this is Rob's Magic Wax. What's magic about it is it's a really nice blend that is soft enough that it'll actually leave a bit of wax on the sole, but it's not so soft that it's gummy. Now, Kevin Burris in New York turned us onto this, showed it to us. We got a hold of the guy, and we sell. It's our number one, Kevin. It's our number one selling item this year. It's a great, convenient way of doing it, and if you've never put wax on your plane, it makes it so much easier to plane. All right, I've retracted the blade, so I'm going to start pushing the plane, and while I'm pushing it, I'm going to start spinning that adjuster, and I'm going to watch to see where the first bit of shaving, and maybe you need to have a separate piece of wood that's a little narrower than the blade to do this, to set up your plane with each time before you start. Now, do it again. I'm watching to see where the first bit of shaving comes out. Okay, it seems to be favoring the right side, so that means I'm going to come in, and I'm going to make a very light adjustment by pushing the lateral adjustment lever to the right side. Now, I should have dialed this in first. Let me get one clean pass all the way. If you heard that skip. Okay. Now, I want to see if, and by the way, if you got a straight piece of lumber, straight grained, and the shaving is coming off and not veering off to the left or veering off to the right, it probably means your blade is parallel to the sole, which means this shaving, if measured here and measured there, should be the same thickness.
Why don't you test that?
Well, we could do that, Jake.
Is there anything that prevents using the wax as a chapstick?
Little lips.
Rex Hansen wants to know that one.
Oh, Rex Hansen. Okay, so I'm going to measure this shaving on this side, and it's coming in at 0.0015. And on this side, it's coming in at 0.0015. So it's not grossly out. Let you know how it works. All right. Hopefully that, so that's the single biggest problem. Blade is not parallel to the sole. Work on that, and then you'll get it. And if it's a problem with sharpening, sometime tonight we'll probably sharpen this blade up, and I'll review that again. But if you watch my 32 seconds to sharp, Luther will can Luther put a link in there?
Possibly, yeah.
Somebody will put a link in, 32 seconds to sharp, and it'll explain all of that in great detail, how you just feather the outside corners. Now, let me just say this. Some folks, like David Charlesworth, is a fan of cambering the blade. That means the end of your blade, has a slight radius on it.
Does the radius go from one corner to the other?
From side to the other. I don't do that. That's not the way I do it. I follow Ian Kirby. Ian Kirby's is straight from there to there. Straight means shortest distance between 2 points. But to avoid having sharp cornered, which leaves tracks, we just feather off ever so slightly the very last 1/8 of an inch on both sides. And what that does is allow the blending of one pass over the next, over the next, over the next to just make it so beautifully smooth you can't feel anything. And you know you got it right when you take a pass and the shaving disintegrates on both edges. That way you're able to do it perfectly. Okay, and I will throw in, don't forget that the key to any any planing operation is sharp blade. The blade must be perfectly sharp in order for it to work and all the rest of the stuff to work. Now, just before we take another question, I need to...
Are we giving anything away?
Yes, I need to tell you. So we take donations through this. If you want to participate, and you're going to hear your story tonight, we've got someone that's going to come on and talk a little bit about the Purple Heart Project, and it's going to be related to the Bench Brigade. And what these people find out is how incredibly satisfying it is to be able to participate to help some of these combat wounded vets. It's the reason why we do it. And rather than listen to me every time, we have somebody else come on and tell you the story. If you would like to participate and help, you can make donations. Just do it. Go to RobCosman.com under our Purple Heart Project, How Can I Help? And it'll show you how to do it. What we like to do is reward those who help, but anybody that would like to enter the draw, you don't have to make a donation. There's no connection. You're welcome to. And tonight we're drawing for every $1,000 in donations, we'll give away a Wood River block plane that has been professionally prepared, meaning it's ready to go to work as soon as you take it out of the box. One of those for every $1,000 increment. Thank you to Santa Claus and Mrs. Claus, his wife. They are the generous sponsors of that program, which is incredible. We're also giving away I love to call it the Dead Cat sweater. I already mentioned this.
You have to rename it on this website.
The hoodie, I know he does. And the Naughty Girl. So as many gifts as we do receive donations we'll give away tonight. Okay, go ahead, Frick. Next one, please.
1 second.
Pete Ambrose. Hey, brother Pete.
Kevin Burke.
Pete is a combat wounded vet. Served both in Vietnam and in the first Iraq Gulf War, and he's from Alabama, Mississippi, and he's a good man. Hope you had a good Thanksgiving, Pete.
All right, this one comes.
Kev, well, I just told Kev. Kev is the reason why we have. That's not your greatest claim to fame, Kev, but we appreciate it. Like I said, it's our #1 selling item this year. Who else?
And anyone else that's on, let me know.
If you're a combat wounded vet that has come to our class, would you please say something down below? Just tell your name, what class you were in, that you're a combat wounded vet. We'd love to give you a shout out and recognize you.
All right, this one comes from the chat from JM Julio from Bogota, Colombia.
Hey, JM, down in Bogota, Colombia.
And he says, how do you determine the lever cap is tight enough? Not over-tightened
you know
or
what? That's a
under-tightened?
really good question, and we get it a lot. So here's the way I do it. This is the lever cap. This is the part that keeps the blade and the chip breaker tight to the face of the frog. That prevents any vibration and also prevents any accidental movement. How tight does it need to be? Well, you have to be able to make adjustments. So I always measure it by how hard it is to push the lateral adjustment lever. And how hard is that? What a terrible thing to have to try to explain. How hard is that? Well, I'm not straining, but it's not moving on its own. So that would be, Jake, how am I going to describe this?
10-pound trigger.
10-pound trigger?
Yeah.
No, it's not 10-pound trigger. Not too tight, not too loose. Well, but here, let me go a little further and tell you a couple other things. You could always, you want to make sure, if you're not using a premium plane, oh yeah, this is a good example. Do we have an old crappy plane? Would you just go and grab one of the Stanleys off there, one of the older ones, and I'll use it as a quick example.
That's
and
not a bedrock?
Yeah, that's not a bedrock. And that might be, down that end?
No. Right there on my bench at the end of it is a number 3 or 4.
So, obviously, the friction, or a lot of the friction, is the back of the blade laying against the face of the frog. So the smoother these two surfaces, thank you. Let's look and see what this looks like. Oh, I've already done this one up. So this was rough. I took this out and cleaned it all up and smoothed up that face. So make sure the face of your frog is nice and smooth. Make sure the back of your blade is nice and smooth. You don't want a bunch of rust in there. That'll only create more friction. And I'm going to promote Wood River, and the same thing with Lee Nielsen. So this is the lateral adjustment lever, and if you look at the two, actually this is a good example of a better example, but that's actually not a bearing. On this one, if you look, that bearing moves, which means as you're doing this, it's a lot smoother action. This is fastened on there, and the real cheap ones, that's just a piece of bent metal, which means when you're trying to do that under the pressure of the lever cap, you're literally grinding metal against metal. So, a better lateral adjustment lever will make a difference. A smoother face of the frog will make a difference. Smooth on the back side of the blade will make a difference. And that will all combine to allow you to have more pressure, and yet at the same time be able to make nice smooth adjustments. And smooth adjustments is a big deal, because you're trying to, when you're moving that, you're moving at such a fraction of an inch that you got to have that level of precision in order for it to work well.
You should talk about making sure that that's
yeah.
loose
If you
too.
buy we did we do a video on tuning up a plane?
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes when you buy a new plane like this, this is a Wood River, that's going to be really stiff. If you just give it a little bend right here, bend it up and then bend it back down, that'll usually free it up just enough so that it'll move much easier. What's this one feel like? That one's pretty easy too. Okay, next question.
Okay, next question also comes from the chat. It comes from Tim McAtee. He says, how much time...
Where's Tim from?
It doesn't say. How much time would you spend on fixing an old blade and chip breaker from a Stanley No. 5 from the 30s before you would just throw it out and buy a new iron?
About a half a second. No. Not worth it. They're too skinned. They're too thin. There's not enough metal there. They flex under the weight of your fingers when you're trying to sharpen them. That old style chip breaker is a pain to try to fit. It's doable, yes, but I'm not interested in that. It's like I always tell people, it's like trying to turn a Lada into a Lamborghini. Yes, they both have 4 wheels, but that's where the similarities end. You're better off. You put all that work and effort into fixing this, and you still don't have great steel. It's not going to hold an edge extremely well. Go out and buy a much thicker replacement iron, whether it's an IBC or a Wood River, and it comes to you almost ready to use. It'll hold an edge better. It's got the new style chip breaker, which is better. So I wouldn't. First thing I would do, which leads me to telling you something else. And we did a live not too long ago where we actually went on and tuned up an old plane. By the time you go out and buy a good blade and chip breaker, you're going to spend north of $100. And you're going to put that good blade and chip breaker in a plane that is only so-so. Stanley planes still to this day are made out of gray iron. Gray iron is something that if dropped on a concrete floor from a bench site will very easily crack or break. The Lee-Nilsons, the Wood Rivers are the two that I can speak for, are made out of something called ductile iron. It's stress relieved, so it comes to you flat, it stays flat, and if you drop it, it will not break. It has the same strength as tensile steel, if I didn't just say that. So you're buying a better tool all around. Everything on it is going to be better. So unless it's your grandfather's old plane that you're putting together, rehabbing for sentimental reasons, by all means, buy yourself a new plane and just go to work. That's my advice. And I'm going to talk about the origin of Wood River planes sometime tonight as well. Well, how's our audience tonight?
We have 684.
Okay.
What's the name of the gentleman we're calling again? I lost him on your phone here. Just so I have him ready.
Well, this is awkward.
Yeah. Well, I got a lot of people running through my mind right now. Who are we calling?
It's in red.
Oh, Rick. Rick in Texas. I spoke to him this afternoon. Sorry, Rick. You get my age. Imagine me saying that.
All right.
Yes, Rick. Did you not? You haven't spoke to him yet?
No,
I told him at about 8 o'clock, at about the hour mark.
The contact disappeared and I can't seem to find it. So, okay, you need another question?
Yep.
All right, this one comes from Joyce Wallace, also in the chat. What
Hi, Joyce.
causes the lateral adjustment lever to be out with a good square blade?
What causes the lateral adjustment lever? Oh, okay, I see what you mean. So, or at least I think I know what you mean. Your blade is square, meaning if you take a square and check the edge of your cutting edge to the side of your plane, it's nice and square, and you put it in the plane, and when it's projecting parallel to the sole, the lateral adjustment lever may be way over here, way over there. Well, a couple of reasons. Probably the most common is that your frog is just a little askew in the plane, so try loosening it up and just moving it a little bit. Depending on what brand it is, some are milled very closely so that as you move that frog forward and back, it stays so that the sides stay parallel to the sides of the frog stay parallel to the sides of the plane. Others don't, so you may have to swing that around a little bit if that makes a difference. And other than that,
But
ultimately
it doesn't.
I suppose the slot might be off a little bit. But yeah, it doesn't matter unless, well, it does matter because you've only got that much adjustment and you've only got that much adjustment. And if it's not enough to get your blade parallel to the sole, then you may have to go in and grind your blade to match that circumstance. So you may have to purposely grind the edge of your blade a little bit out of square in order for it to line up.
But if your blade was square, I can't see the frog sitting in there so far askew that the lateral adjustment.
No, but I mean, I don't know what plane she's using either. I'll give you another example of having to do something like that. So if you look at the amount of lateral adjustment that you have available to you in a shoulder plane, there's that much. Okay, that's how much you're allowed to blade. Your blade is able to move. Well, let me tell you something. That's almost nothing by the time you get out there, because this is where we're talking about, and this is at the back end. There's next to no adjustment, so you have to almost go in and grind your blade so that it's parallel to the sole. That's another one of those circumstances. And you also remember too that these planes were never. If you're talking about Stanleys or records or anything made prior to the 1980s, these planes were their primary function was to remove wood. What Lee Nelson did when he started in 1981 was he brought a plane up to a level where not only would it remove wood, but it'll finish wood. The other ones weren't. So the parts were pretty sloppy. The fit and finish, questionable at best. And the reason you could take parts out of one Stanley plane and put them in another is because the tolerances were so wide open that it didn't really matter. There was nothing precise about it. So unfortunately, if you've got a plane like that, you're going to have to just make it work. Frick, next.
Right. Yep. One more from the chat comes from Duke Engine. I don't know if that's his real name.
Duke Engine?
It's a pretty cool name, though.
Duke.
When planing hardwood like beech and local walnut, I often obtain shavings that are in one piece, but with a lot of lacerations in it. Does this depend from sharpening or thin blade or wrong throat?
So I'm going to assume that what he's talking about is instead of your shaving being intact,
Well, you can just scratch,
like that.
if you just scratch the surface with something and then...
I got to put my plane together. Instead of the plane producing a nice shaving that is fully intact, end to end, side to side, you end up with a shaving that is serrated. Like that. And I did that just by running my fingernail in there. So that is almost always a result of nicks in the edge of your blade. I'll show you how to find that out if you're brave enough. And just, if you're going to do this, do it carefully. Just take your fingernail and I'm going to pull it this way along the edge of the blade. Now, if you're careful, there's no reason why you should be worried about doing this. And that should be one nice, smooth motion. But as I can feel that, it's catch, 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 catch all the way along there. So if I looked at it under magnification, I would see that there would be all kinds of nicks in the end of that blade. And they will produce serrated shavings. When you can take your fingernail, you experienced this, Ken? And drag it along the edge of that blade, and it's just as smooth, there is absolutely no interruptions. Then you know you should be able to pull a perfectly intact shaving over the entire length of that board.
And make sure there's no jagged edges on the stone.
Yeah, okay, good, thank you. So what Ken means is, if it's a brand new plane, you want to run your fingernail along both sides of the throat, because sometimes when they cut that opening, they'll leave a little bit of a burr, and that little burr will do just what I just did. If it puts a little depression in the piece of wood, and you take a plane and go over it, you're going to end up with these little serrations, right? They're creating it just before the blade picks it up. So you have to be careful of that. And then the other thing would be, depending on what's going on, if you've got checks in your wood, then that wood has been separated right there, and when you pull a shaving off, it's going to be separated.
However, you would know if that was the case if you had a full width shaving
Good.
at the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah, so you're planing, nice shaving, all of a sudden there's rips. Well, that's obviously in the wood. Usually it's on the blade edge, and the best way to tell is to be brave. Take your fingernail and pull it like that along the edge, and you'll be able to identify it. Next, Rick. Megan, any more vets? Hey, Ray. Cool Ray from Louisiana. Happy Thanksgiving, Ray.
All right, this comes from John Hutchison in Texas. And he says...
Let me know if Josh Brion's on tonight.
He says, what can you do to ensure that the board maintains a consistent thickness throughout its length and width while planing?
Okay, tell me his name again, please. I was thinking of Josh when you asked that question.
John Hutchison.
Hi, John. And where is he? In Texas?
Texas, yeah.
And a question is? Read it for me again, please.
What can you do to ensure that a board maintains a consistent thickness throughout its length and width while planing?
Okay, so that's a little bit of a complicated question because there's a lot to do. The single biggest problem that people make is when they plane a wide board. Let's get one up here. Here's a piece of, in Newfoundland, this would be called, what do they call that in Newfoundland?
Red Hoke.
Hoke.
Gary Burnett's here.
Hey, Gary. Gary's part of the furniture. Newfoundlanders, for some reason, don't like certain letters of the alphabet. I have several friends from there. Okay, so this is the surface isn't perfectly even because we had actually used this as a test piece in gluing up joints. So what I'm going to do is work to get it smooth and flat. Now you're not going to get a intact shaving when you're planing oak because of the way the grain is. Okay, so I'm planing this piece of wood and I want to keep the thickness the same. And what a lot of folks will have a tendency to do is they'll plane here and then they take another pass here and then they take a pass over here. Maybe they're back over here again. What you have to do is take a pass, and that pass means the blade must be hanging over the edge some amount, so you don't even leave a strip here undone. Now let's say that my blade ended right here, so the next pass has to overlap the previous one, and it will give me a little bit of an edge somewhere right about here. The next pass will do the same thing, overlapping a bit on the first. And if it isn't wide enough, and this one isn't because I've got the edge, the blade stopped right there. So this one the last pass has to be hanging over the edge of the board on that side. So what I've done is I've removed the same amount of wood from side to side. So every time I do that, I have to take the same amount of material off the entire surface. So I'm bringing the entire level down like that. Now what I do frequently is I'll use my plane on its edge like that, and I will check to see if I'm staying flat. Now, I'm going to do this, and right here in the end, there's a little bit of a low spot right there. So what I would do is avoid that. So I would lift off. Don't go all the way to the end right there. Check again. Okay, and that corrected itself. Now, obviously you want to check it, but if you're processing a piece of lumber entirely by hand, once you've got a flat surface, then what you're going to do, and you would use your winding sticks to verify it, so there's no wind or twist in that board, you're going to take your marking gauge, and you're going to set your marking gauge for the thickness of what you ultimately want, and you're going to gauge a line referencing off of the flat surface all the way around the board. Sometimes easier to put a piece of masking tape on here, especially if your eyesight's not as great as it once was. Show you what I mean. Let me just run this real fast to make it a little easier to work. Okay, so this surface has been done. It's nice and flat. This is my reference. Take a piece of masking tape. Where is the end? Jake, if you see it, yell. There it is.
Jake Terrell's on.
Hey, Jake. I just talked to Jake the other day. Yesterday, as a matter of fact. He's my political consultant. So, you put a piece of masking tape on like that. Set your marking gauge for the thickness that you want. And then run a line. And you want a good marking gauge. Don't buy cheap tools. You're only going to suffer. You got to buy tools that are better than you. That way, you'll eventually get to be as good as they are, and you won't have to replace them. But if you buy junk, you'll probably never get there to begin with because it'll frustrate you so bad. But if you do, you're eventually going to replace them. That makes no sense. Buy them once. And then what you can do is tear that off. Now, you can plane right down to the tape line. It's easy to see. And just use the side of your plane. Frequently check it. And if you're getting way off on one side, then you know, oh, shoot. And remember, you can't build up a low corner. So if in the process of doing this is low, I just need to avoid that because you always have to bring the high down to the low. So take a pencil or something and identify the area that you want to avoid, and then just don't plane it. But plane, check. Plane, check. It's right in your hand. It's easy to do. Got to get into the habit. Remember that old adage, measure twice, cut once? Well, check plane 3 times, check once. 3, 4.
I think it's also important to point out that you, unlike with power tools, you constantly have to be checking what's going on when you're planing, like to prevent
A bump?
a bump
Or a
in the
hollow.
middle or a hollow.
Yeah, you have to when you're working hand tools, you're the David Pye coined the phrase "workmanship of risk," which means the process is dependent upon you. So you have to be constantly, as Jake mentioned, you have to be checking your work all along the way. Now, the good news is, as you get better at this. For instance, I'm probably at a point where I could take that down. If I wanted to drop that surface down a 1/16 of an inch, I'm pretty sure that without checking it, I could take it down that 1/16 of an inch and it would remain flat and parallel to the bottom, just because I know enough when I do it to take a pass, take a pass, take a pass. The entire surface has been covered, and one pass on each. Yeah, whatever. You understand what I mean? So it doesn't take you very long, but you got to get started right. Who's going to read questions if Frick's not here? Where'd he go? You got one, Ken?
Wait.
Frick.
I was talking.
Oh.
Rick doesn't
Rick.
have FaceTime or anything, so we were.
Are you going to do the other thing?
Well, we're going through Facebook, I think.
Okay. Go ahead, Ken.
Wait, we can't hear Ken.
Oh, you don't have a mic, Ken.
Well, you can repeat it. Patrick Rager asked,
Patrick from where?
didn't say.
Patrick from didn't say.
IBC iron chip breaker were a worthwhile upgrade.
I'm sorry, Ken. Read that. Say that again. I didn't.
IBC iron and chip breaker are a worthwhile upgrade.
Oh, yeah.
What's the question?
So the question was, is an IBC a worthwhile upgrade? So I got to answer this truthfully. It's the only way it can work. Then I don't have to worry. That way I don't have to have a great memory. If you look at the blade in a Wood River plane, they're $20. A replacement blade by IBC for that same plane is, Jake?
Well, we don't sell just a blade.
2 3/8. What's it worth?
45, 50?
$50. So that means, based on that blade, that IBC blade should be 2.5 times better than the standard Wood River blade, which to me would mean then it should stay sharp 2.5 times longer. Well, no, it's not going to. It is not going to stay sharp 2.5 times longer. The Wood River blades are good blades. The IBCs are better blades, but they're better by a smaller margin than is reflected in the price. So what are you willing to spend in order to get that little bit of improvement? And I would be hard pressed to try to talk you into that over buying a couple of extra Wood River blades, but it's your call. They certainly come. They're much nicer, much nicer to look at. They've polished the sides and they're a little bit thicker. The standard blade in a Wood River plane is 125 thou, and the IBC replacement is 140 thou. Again, it's up to you, but I would pick an IBC blade over anybody else's in terms of if you're going to buy a premium blade. That's the one I would choose. But is it going to be that much better than the original? No, can't be. Question, Frick?
All right, here we go. So this one comes from, that one's a long one, Boris Kogan in Gilroy, California. He says, I have a 56 by 36 glue up that I need to plane. Please provide some tips and techniques for planing something that large.
Okay, Boris, where is he?
Gilroy, California.
Gilroy, California. And what's the dimensions of the piece?
56 and 36.
So 56 inches long, so right to here, and 36 inches wide. Get an apprentice. Is that what he said? 36 inches wide? Mm-hmm. How thick is it?
Doesn't say.
Well, so there's the piece of wood that he's going to hand plane. It's that wide and it's that long. Oh my. I don't know if he's starting from rough, did he say? If all you were doing, Boris, was going in and, well, actually, you know what? The chances are, unless it's a single wide board, which would be a nice piece of wood, if you've glued up numerous pieces, you probably don't have a 36-inch wide thickness planer. Most people don't. So you're going to have to go in. Now, what I would do, or if you're about to tackle this and you're asking for advice, the first thing I would do would be I would handle each board individually. So let's say you're fortunate enough to have...
Wait, Frick, can you read that question again?
I have a 56 by 36 glue up that I need to plane. Please provide some tips and techniques for planing something that large.
Okay, so it's already glued up.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna continue what I was saying. What I would have done, Boris, is I would have gone in and I would have planed each of those boards before I glued it up. So essentially all the work is done. And then what I would have done is I would have matched the two. I would have planed them, the first two, and when I glued them together, I would have actually clamped the edges with a clamp to keep it as flush as possible. And I might have even gone in after the first two were glued up and smoothed up that joint, and then glued on the third piece. And once that glue dried, go in and clean up that joint. And then if there's a fourth one, go in and do the same thing, instead of trying to just glue them all up and then having to come in and hand plane that huge surface, which not only is it going to be tough, but you really can't plane effectively. To plane effectively out here is hard. That's why benches aren't typical woodworking benches. Hand tool benches are not very wide. You really can't plane much beyond that. So you're going to have to get up on top of this thing. That's you got a task in front of you. I would have a really sharp blade, and now that it's already glued up, I would start on the glue joints, and I would bring them down so that they are flush, and hopefully they're not too out of whack. But you have a task in front of you. If it was really bad, I would probably plane across the grain, which is sometimes easier. It doesn't leave a good great finish, but it'll allow you to remove stock more readily and with a lot less effort. And then once you've got it leveled, then you've got to come in and plane it with the grain to try to get a nice smooth finish.
What plane should you use?
I would use a 5.5 on something that big. And I would definitely buy myself 2 packages, the 2 tubes of that, because it cuts the effort in half or more. So lots of wax. I would probably have 3 or 4 blades already pre-sharpened so that I can just plane when it's dull, switch it out and keep on going. And check your work. You'll notice anyway, you're planing a big enough surface, you end up with a low spot and you're not going to be able to get at it. Your plane won't make contact, so you're going to have to go in on either side of it and get rid of the high spot. You're going to have fun. Hopefully it's a nice easy wood to plane, but in retrospect, plane each board beforehand. When I build my bench, this is made up out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pieces of maple. I went in and I planed all of these pieces, the top edge, before I put them together. And one thing that helped me identify was the best direction to plane. So I then lined them all up so that all the arrows were going the same way. And I indexed them, so when I glued it all up, all I had to do was take my 4.5 literally and go in and just clean up the joint marks, more or less just get rid of a little bit of glue squeeze out. The planing was already done. So take it down to its smallest part and tackle that first. Next time. Go ahead, Frank.
All right, another question. This one comes from username Wanderlicious.
Wanderlicious?
From Japan.
Ah.
And she wants to, what do you think about Japanese planes?
Well, I don't think about them a lot. The only Japanese tool that I have, somewhere I have a Japanese dovetail saw, cuts on the pull stroke. A lot of the teeth are broken off, which is indicative of mixing Japanese tools with Western style woodworking. Our hardwoods need a robust tooth, so that's why I use Western style push saws. Japanese tend to pull their planes instead of push them. They're completely different style of plane, and I'm a fan of the Western style traditional bevel down bench plane. I don't like the bevel up at all. Can't stand them. This is what I prefer. So I'm not saying anything bad about them, because obviously the Japanese created their tools for their wood and their work, and the Western craftsmen developed their tools for their work style and their wood. So that's the most I can tell you about that. And I'm not a fan of the chisels either, but again, completely different philosophy, great steel, but it's all in what you like and what you're comfortable with. Frick?
Okay, next one comes from Nicholas Whale in the chat. He says,
Nicholas?
Rob's shavings always seem to come shooting out of the plane. Mine always curl up tightly. Is this more from the wood or the plane? My surface still ends up smooth. Maybe it's not important.
No, it's not important. We pre-cut them before we film. Duh. You know what? Different pieces of wood react differently. So if I put this piece of yellow cedar in here that is getting smaller by the day and plane it, we'll see how the shaving comes out. So this one comes out fairly tight. I'll pull a blade in for a lighter pass. Pulled it in too far. Maybe that's what you're talking about. But if I didn't pull it out like that, what'll happen? Well, it kind of does. I think it's probably more to do with the species of wood. Maybe the thickness of the shaving. The sharper your blade, the thinner the shaving you can get. Love that smell. Yeah, check the sharpness of your blade. In almost every case, and I would go so far as to say 98% of the time, hand planing problems are a direct result of the sharpening job that's been done. Not so much the setup of the plane, with the exception of what I mentioned about plane tracks. That's almost always the blades not sitting in there properly. Okay, Frick?
Okay, next question comes from Joe Phillips. He says, can
Hi, Joe.
Rob talk about how to correct a lever cap sliding up while under tension?
Oh, yeah, this happens occasionally. So, I've seen this problem. If this screw is not perpendicular to the face of the frog, it's on a bit of an angle, then it's not going to sit properly when the lever cap is engaged or cocked. The underside of that should be nice and flat. I've seen some where the machining was really bad and that lever cap, that screw was really loose. So that would be an issue as well, to where it was actually moving around, and that's probably more than likely the problem. I don't know what you can do other than drill and retap that to a bigger size and get another screw to fit. What else could it be? If it's a brand new plane and it's doing that, so in other words, what he's saying, I assume, is you have that down tight, you retract the blade, and in the process of pulling this back, instead of the lever cap staying tight and the blade sliding, the whole thing is coming back and it's popping up loose. Now, something else you can do is you can reduce the friction between the lever cap and the backside of the chip breaker so that will slide more readily. You want the pressure, but you want to eliminate some of the friction. So go in there and polish the underside of your lever cap. And the way I would do that is set that on a stone. And usually what you have to do is you have to have something over here to rest this part on. I always just turn one of my Shaptons upside down because that's glass. And then you're going to set this, and I would use a trend diamond plate on that, the coarse side, and get it set up, and then go in there and just work that surface until that's a little bit smoother than it is. And you also want to make sure that's nice and flat so that that'll properly transfer pressure onto the back side of your chip breaker so that it's uniform all the way across. Try that, see what happens. Anybody else? Any other bets? No? How are our donations tonight?
We haven't added them up yet. They're not
stellar. All right, so let me take a second. What time is it?
8:05.
Okay, are we gonna? How many people do we have on?
We have 830.
Okay, well is Rick ready?
I can get him ready. Yes.
Okay, you get him ready. I'm just going to tell the story real quick. So every once in a while, somebody has a question about where do the Wood River planes come from. And a lot of times people think there's a knockoff of Lee Nelson. Well, no, that's not true. First of all, my history real quick. I tried to earn a living building furniture. I went to Brigham Young University, studied furniture design under Milo Boffman and Dale Nish. Moved back to New Brunswick in 1989 and started my business. 11 years into it, I think we had 6 children. We were starving to death. I was working 6 days a week, every available hour, but could not make enough money to make ends meet. Why? Well, a lot of problems. But the average person under 40 doesn't know where boards come from trees, so who cares if I cut dovetails for them or not? Tom Lee Nelson contacted me by email through a friend that I knew in England in late 99, wanted to know if I'd be interested in selling his tools in Canada. Well, I didn't know who he was, had never heard of the company. I had my head buried trying to earn a living. I decided to drive down. It's about 3 hours away, 3.5, and I was quite impressed with what I saw. These were really good planes that literally came to you ready to be used. Well, I had been taught by people like Alan Peters and Monroe Robinson and some of the other great woodworkers of the 80s and 90s how to get a plane into a position where it would work well. And here a guy was selling them already ready like that. But they were terribly expensive, at least that's what I thought. I thought, okay, I'll bring them home and it'll be a part-time venture at best. A month later, it was full-time, and it went on to literally rescue us from the jaws of poverty. Anyway, what Lee Nelson had done, had taken old Stanley Bedrocks, which was Stanley's best plane, and he simply applied better materials and tighter tolerances. There were no other changes to speak of. And he produced those planes. Now, any patents that protected those Stanley planes had long since expired. That was fine. In 2008, they came to me and said, we have to change the way we distribute. And they did. So I lost my retail business. And shortly thereafter, Woodcraft lost their opportunity to sell Lee Nelson planes. And they were a big retailer of Lee Nelson planes. Woodcraft contacted me and said, we need a hand plane line. Can you help us? Will you work with us? So I said, yes. The intent at first was to develop a US-made plane. Well, that was 2008. There were no foundries, and what samples they eventually got back were dreadful. We ended up instead looking at the Wood River line that they already had, and that was a pretty terrible plane. It looked exactly like the Stanley Bedrock, but the machining and a lot of other things were bad, primarily because nobody involved in the manufacture of them really knew how these things were worked. In fact, I remember when we first started doing this, that one of the scientists over there, machinists that were making these, asked the question, what do you do with this thing? So If you have no idea what the plane's for, how are you going to know how to make it better? I went to work with them. We improved it. We copied the Stanley Bedrock plane, just like Lee Nilsson copied the Stanley Bedrock plane and Clifton copied the Stanley Bedrock plane. So there was no infringement upon Lee Nilsson's planes when the Wood Rivers were being made. And there's a lot of other stuff I won't bother getting into, but there was communication back and forth between the two companies to make sure there wasn't any infringement. But one guy didn't have anything to protect because he was simply copying a design, and so was Wood River, and that's what they did. We've made improvements on and above that since, but that's where the plane line came from. That was my involvement, and I haven't done anything with the plane for several years, but I do have the opportunity to sell them in Canada, to which I'm proud because I think they represent the best value. I will go on record as saying Lee Nilsson makes the best planes. Wood River makes the best value in planes. Depending on how much money you have, you decide which one you want. Okay, so we're ready? All right. Pardon? 1,500? So about a year ago, I woke up one night realizing that all these combat vets that we have brought into our surroundings to teach them hand tool woodworking, we were sending them home with tools but no bench. And as I started calling some of them, I realized they hadn't done any woodwork since because they had nowhere to do it. They had no bench. And I said, we have got to figure out a way to do it. We had developed a bench years before that was very easy to build. And Jack Lane came into my life, and Jack volunteered. He said, Rob, I would love to head this up for you. And he and Chris Shahusky have teamed up to make it so that every combat wounded vet that comes to our class or has come to our class will be able to get a bench delivered to them at the expense of a civilian volunteer who has stepped up and said, I want to build that bench. We provide them with the vise, they procure all the other materials, we give them the plans, they build it to our specs, and Jack coordinates it so that they can actually deliver it. And this is incredible. This has literally changed the course of lives for some of these vets because they had these skills, they have the tools, they had nowhere to exercise them, and it faded away, and now it's been able to bring it back. And there's some very heartwarming stories. You can go on our Facebook page and actually see the videos of these benches being delivered. So I'm going to introduce you to a man who has made and delivered 3 benches to 3 different vets. And Rick, they call Rick the MVP of the Bench Brigade program because of his generosity. And all I asked him to do was just go on and just tell his story about this. What I want you people watching to realize is what we're doing, how you can help, and if you want to be a part of it, why you might want to be a part of it based on the kind of experiences you're going to hear from Rick. So if Rick is there.
He is.
Rick?
Yeah.
Take it away.
Who's this?
Who's this?
Yeah, what's your name?
Yeah, I forgot. It's Rob.
Oh, yeah, Rob. Yeah, we talked this morning, didn't we?
We did.
Okay.
I think he's rubbing it in. So you don't have 10 kids, so you don't have that excuse.
Well, I'm much older than you, so I probably have more of an excuse.
Oh, okay.
Well, Rob told me that I have 6 or 7 minutes to kind of describe my experiences and why I do it. And my wife tells me I can't even finish a joke in 7 minutes, so I'll try my best. I got into this watching Rob's show, and I was inspired by his woodworking, but I was even more inspired when he was shedding a tear talking about the vets he had met, the change in their life by going through his program and learning how to work with wood and divert their concentration from PTSD to woodworking, and how well it worked. And I thought about that, and I retired 2 years ago, and I've been sitting around thinking, how can I pay back some of what the world's given me. And I hadn't come up with anything that really fit my fancy. And then all of a sudden they started talking about the bench brigade and how the whole story he just told you about they don't have benches after they go to the school. They're all excited. They have tools. They have knowledge. They have desire, but they had no place to build anything on. And I thought, what a great time for me to jump in because that's right up my alley. And so I called them up and said, count me in. And so they gave me one vet. And after talking to that vet, I wanted to do even more because this is a guy that enlisted for his country, was diving from high altitude, had a bad landing, injured his neck, and then when he got over that, I don't remember the time frame, but then he was back in the field again doing jungle training when a jet came too close to the treetops, chopped off the top of a tree, it fell down and landed right on him. And my heart just dropped when he tells the story because he spent the next 8 years on his back in bed recovering. Now, if that isn't dedication or giving something to your country that the rest of us don't do, I don't know what is. And then when you talk to him, you'd never know it. You'd never know that he had such a horrific time. He's so modest, he's so gentle, and it was my pleasure to build him a bench. Now,
That was Chris?
yeah. So anyway, I built benches for two other gentlemen. You just heard him say hi to Cool Ray. Well, hi, Cool Ray. I built him a bench. Nicest guy, modest, hardworking guy, and he really deserves a bench. He didn't have the horrific injuries or anything, but he had lots of friends that were really hurt by war, and I think that hurts him as much as his friends hurt him. So, Ray, I'm glad you've got a bench too. And then the last person that I gave a bench to was Chris in Kerrville. And Chris is a spectacular person. He had an injury, lost a leg, has a prosthetic. He could have dropped into a deep, dark hole and never come out. I would have, probably. And then, all of a sudden, he turns it around, and he's got a whole group of people. He brings in vets. They teach him woodworking, welding, auto body, bicycling, canoeing, anything. And he's the leader. He's at the front of the pack, riding the bicycle or driving the canoe or teaching them these trades. And he has to drive an hour and 15 minutes to get there every time he goes in to help these vets. So here's a guy who is just a spectacular person. And all these guys have touched me more than I can describe here. So the reason I did this was I wanted to give back. I'm happy that I did it. I would have built 10 more benches if the program was not closed down due to COVID, and would keep going. And so that's pretty much my story. I do need to give a shout out to Chris Shikaki. He has just been an inspiration to me as well as Rob, and that every time I talk to him, he follows up shipping on these benches to the people, and while he's visiting with them, the first words out of his mouth is, what can I get you? Do you need some wood? Do you need some tools? What do you need? You know, say anything. And he ships them his tools and anything else that he deems helpful to them. And I've never seen a bigger heart in a person than him. So we all should thank Chris for his efforts too. So that's about it. I am deeply touched by these guys and this program, and I hope that other people get touched too and help these guys out, because they really do need some help. That's it.
Thank you, Rick. You put a smile on my face, because when you start naming names, it brings back great memories that I had spending time with them. So I appreciate you doing that. We will have Chris will be one of our next guests on there, because Jack can never say enough about Chris. But you know what?
Yeah.
The nice thing about this, it seems to attract the very best people out there. And what's better than rubbing shoulders with people that you admire? And that's one of the biggest advantages.
You should hang out with great people.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the real pleasures of doing this Purple Heart Project, because you get to be around these people that literally are willing to sacrifice themselves for people they don't even know. And how do you describe someone who's a better person than someone that is willing to do that? That's the ultimate sacrifice. It's amazing.
Yep.
They deserve our thanks. They deserve our admiration. They deserve anything we can do, particularly those who are injured, to help alleviate that pain that they're having to live with. And if it means building them a bench or paying for some tools, whatever. But let's do it. Thank you.
I agree.
Have a Merry Christmas.
You too. Thank you.
Now, Jack's going to shoot me if you all flood me wanting to join the bench brigade, because we currently have more volunteers than we have benches to be built. But we plan to do a whole lot more of this as soon as this COVID thing gets out of our hair, so we can get guys across the border. And every once in a while, we need a bench built in a very remote area. So if you want to be a participant in this, go ahead and email me, Rob@RobCosman.com, and I will forward your contact information to Jack, and he will put you in our database. And when the time comes that we need someone in that area, you will get an opportunity, and it is an opportunity. All right. Before I go, anything else? Let's go do some more questions. Pardon? Rick?
What?
Question? You know, you're going to have them ready for me? Bang, bang, bang.
I was. And then more was put on my plate than I expected. But
You ate it all.
Yeah, twice. 2 plates. Mikkel Miller from Tucson, Arizona.
Hi, Mikkel.
How do you know what plane to use? I know this is a vague question. To start from rough sawn or rough cut to get the board to dimensions.
Okay, well, let's hit it kind of in a general sense. So here I have a piece of wood that measures 4 feet in length, just 1/4 inch shy. If I want that edge to be straight, and we'll just take kind of the general planes. So here's a smoother, here's a jack, here's a jointer. Now I'm going to eliminate the option of a shoulder plane and a block plane. I want this edge to be nice and straight. If I use a smoother, by the way, the blade, everything is exactly the same on this plane, on this plane, and on this plane. That means the front knob, the rear tote, the blade, the chip breaker, the lateral, the lever cap, the frog, everything is identical. The only thing different is the length of the sole. They're all the same width. This one is 10.5 inches long. At 10.5 inches, if there were any slight bumps or valleys in this board, this plane would easily follow those without eliminating them. Now, it would result in a nice smooth surface, but it may not be flat. If I came along with this plane, it would also do the same job as that, but to a lesser degree, because being a little bit longer, it would bridge over 2 high spots and not allow you to dig down. So it would take the tops off of those high spots. But that would be effective, say, maybe on a board this long. Now, if we step up to the number 7 jointer, by the way, that was 14.75 inches long. This one is 22 inches. So at 22 inches, this sole is going to bridge off of the high spots, and before you can get down into a low area, all of those high spots are going to have to be brought down. So in straightening a long edge or flattening a large surface, your choice would be the jointer because of that function. If I was building a piece of furniture and I simply wanted to get a beautiful finish on that piece of wood that had already been processed, now I just want the final finish, I would come in and I would use either of these two, but most people would choose the smoother because it's not going to take off high spots and low spots. It's just going to leave a nice smooth surface. Let me take that just a little bit further. You build a coffee table that's 36 inches long. The top is 3/4 of an inch thick. It's not perfectly flat, but it doesn't matter. It's not a reference surface. If you try to get that final finish with your jointer, and there's just maybe 1/8 of an inch difference from one side to the other, a little bit of a twist, not really a big issue. But on a jointer, you may end up taking a 1/16 of an inch off of this corner, more so than the opposite corner, just because of the way that long sole works. Well, if you have any kind of surface or edge decoration, a 1/16 of an inch is going to be noticeable. So there's where you would want to come in and use your smoother. That'll allow you to reach the entire surface without changing anything in terms of thickness of the board from one side to the other. This is my bench top. This is my reference. When I set things on here, I will determine if they're flat based on how they sit on the bench top. Do I want the top perfectly smooth, or do I want it closer to being perfectly flat? The latter is the true. So I would use my jointer to go in and prepare this surface, whereas I might use my smoother to go in and prepare the top of a coffee table. Hopefully that helps. Josh Brand?
Is on, and he said, I got my
You can't hear you. I'll read it. I got it here. So I think you meant to mention this earlier, but Josh said, I got my bench a few days ago from the Bench Brigade. It brought back the passion I had during the Purple Heart Project. Thank you so much, Rob, for everything you have done and do for us.
Josh, my pleasure, brother. God save the Queen. Now, just move it a little bit, Jake, so I can read a note. So David Anderson, who rubbed all that off?
I did.
David Anderson and Fred Small. So David Anderson is in Eckville, Alberta. Now, for those of you who don't know Canadian geography, we're relatively flat. You get to Alberta, you get to British Columbia and Alberta, well, part of Alberta, all of British Columbia is hilly. So in order to get from one point to another, you usually got to take a long way around. Telling you that because David drove 8 hours from Alberta to deliver that bench to Josh, 8 hours each way, and his friend Fred went with him, and they delivered Josh's bench. That's what I call going above and beyond. But they did it because they want to. They did it because they appreciate you, Josh, and what you've done. We all do. I hope you understand that, and it really, I know you do. Josh was in our, was Josh in your class, Ken?
Yeah.
Yeah. Big guy. Big tall guy. His wife just had a baby recently. Congratulations. And I hope things are looking wonderful. Merry Christmas to you. Use that bench. And if you need anything, call Chris Chahusky. He'll send you anything you want. Call me too. I'll do the same thing. And I must mention, who built who was originally going to do it? Jake, did you take that off on purpose?
Dan. Yes.
Oh, Dan.
The ones
Okay.
that you'd finished. Yeah.
Okay, so Dan, I can't pronounce Dad's
Poplars?
Poplar, Poppelall, I can't remember.
Yeah. Can't even spell it. Either.
Dan is near Seattle, Washington, and he had volunteered. In fact, he was the very first one to volunteer, and he was going to build that bench for Josh, but because of COVID, wasn't able to get across the border. So we appreciate his stepping up to the plate, and it wasn't any fault of his that things couldn't happen. But these are the kind of people that you get to be around. That is a privilege. I'm glad you're here, Josh. Frick?
Jeff O'Connor is also on.
Jeffrey? Jake, did you have anything you want to say to Jeff?
I thought we restricted his access.
Yeah, we probably did. Is Super Dave on?
Yeah, actually, Michelle just volunteered Super Dave's services to build benches, and then Super Dave quickly wanted me to block her from the chat for the rest of the evening.
So this is we have so much fun with these guys. If you ever get a chance to come up, you will love it. Jeff O'Connor is probably one of the most prolific woodworkers. I'm going to tell you something. So, a little bit of a commercial for Jeff. Jeff is would you say Jeff is the most prolific woodworker of all the vets that we've had? Yeah.
Besides Super Dave.
Well, of course.
But he's trained by Super Dave.
You guys think Super Dave is Super Dave because of saving all those orphans in Lake Ontario. Super Dave is Super Dave because of his super ultra fine woodworking, which, by the way, you got to check that out too. Anyway, so Jeff makes natural boar's hair. No, what's the badger hair shaving brushes. So last Christmas, Jake got me one, and I pay my boys to shave me. So Bo does it now, and I lay out on the table and I have the great music playing, and get the hot towels and Jeff's shaving soap and his little what was mine made out of?
Bog oak.
Oh yeah, English bog oak. Anyway, and it's just extremely relaxing.
I don't think it's English bog oak.
Yeah, it's English bog oak.
I think it's Irish.
Irish bog oak. Okay, well, let them fight about that. So you should check out Jeff. What's his website?
O'Connor Woodworking.
O'Connor Woodworking. Does he have a website, or is it just off the Facebook page?
I think so.
What is she laughing at? If you go to O'Connor Woodworking, look it up on Facebook or find him, and you might want to order one of these for Christmas because it's fantastic. I just thrilled with mine. I use it.
Super Dave's talking about how him and Jeff are going to have to come square Jake away, and Super Dave said I need some Irish kiss sticks for my next trip to Canada.
Yeah, go on and check out Jeff's page, and you'll be able to get clued into what all this is about. Anyways, Jeff, great to have you here. Super Dave, always great to have you here. Super Dave is going to start working with us very soon in an increased capacity. We'll tell you more about that in due time. Anything else, Frick? Another question.
All right, this next question comes from John Guess, and he says, can you point out each part of a plane?
Yes. All right, let's do this. So nobody has asked, Rob, which plane should I be buying first? So I'm just going to address that. This is the plane that I would buy first and foremost, and I thank David Charlesworth for introducing me to it. I was always a fan of the 4.5, and in meeting David, I've come to agree with him. We would call this the Super Smoother. Why? Well, it has lots of mass. It's long enough to be really effective on the shooting board, but not so heavy as to make it cumbersome. Now, I'm kind of getting a little bit away from the question, but I've got to throw this in. So you have to have a shooting board. Is that sale on today? Mm-hmm. So we make shooting boards, but we make them special. We make them with a slight curve and like that, which ensures that they always stay square, and that's a little bit complicated to explain, but trust me. When you're using a shooting board and the function of a shooting board, so that you can square up the edge of a board without having to put it in the vise and balance it this way and that way, your shooting board does that for you. What you want in a plane on a shooting board is weight and length. Length meaning distance from here to the blade allows you to get a good run at the board before your blade engages the wood. Now, you may be thinking, well, isn't this one longer? Yes, it is. That's even longer, it's even heavier, it's even better on the shooting board, but it's a very big and cumbersome plane to try to use general purpose on the bench. So that's the reason why I don't start you off with a number 7. This plane works extremely well on the shooting board and is just the right size for general smoothing and planing at the bench. The 5.5. If you are an adult male, this is the plane that you want. Not a 5, not a 4. It has more room on the rear handle called the tote, and it's quite comfortable. If you're a very small person, perhaps a female, then you might want to look at a number 5, which is the same length, but instead of a 2 3/8 inch wide blade, it's a 2 inch wide blade, so it's a little bit lighter. But for an average male doing woodworking, 5.5. Your options that I would recommend, there's lots out there, but this is what I would recommend, would either be a Lee Nelson 5.5 or a Wood River 5.5. You're looking at $375 versus $270. $270. So if you're looking at value, that means you can almost buy, for the same money, you can buy a Wood River block plane and a Wood River 5.5 for the same amount of money, but it's up to you. So the parts. This is called the lever cap. The purpose of this spring-loaded lever cap is to put pressure on the blade and chip breaker to keep it from vibrating when you're using it. This is the cap iron, the chip breaker, the back iron, lots of different names, and that is held to the blade. Now, I'm assuming the person that asked this question is new to this. If I take that screw off, where you don't normally have to, you'll notice that the bevel is on the bottom side. In other words, it lays in there like that. The chip breaker sits on the back of the blade, and there's a little bit of a lip right here, so that when that sits on there, you should be able to see a gap between the two. The gap stops right up here at the end, and it touches back here, so that when you apply the pressure from the lever cap, because this doesn't touch anywhere except for here and here, all that pressure is delivered right out there to the cutting edge to help stabilize it. So lever cap, cap iron, back iron, chip breaker, whatever you want, the iron or the blade. Over here you have the lateral adjustment lever. Its purpose is to skew the blade like this so that you can get it so that it is projecting out of the throat, this opening, parallel to the sole, so the thickness of the shaving is the same side to side, so that when you take a pass on a piece of wood, you're removing the same amount of material and you're not throwing that edge out of square. This is called the yoke. The yoke is connected to this very interesting device called an adjuster. That's not on your plane. You have what's called an adjuster knob. If you're older than 50 and you've got a bit of arthritis, or you find that difficult to turn, we did, so we developed this just recently. It's a retrofit. Those 5 spokes make it so much easier because you give lots of leverage. Fantastic device, and I'm sorry we're out of stock, but they'll be back in quite shortly. Can they go on and register? Register to be notified when it's ready? Yeah, so you can do that on our site. Okay, so the adjuster knob, as that turns, it connects to what's called the yoke. The yoke goes through the blade, and makes contact in this little rectangular hole in the chip breaker. And by spinning it in a clockwise rotation, it will push the blade out to make a thicker shaving. By spinning it in a counterclockwise rotation, it pulls it back. This is a lateral adjustment lever. As I mentioned, it skews it side to side.
You should mention the improvement
on
the yoke.
Oh, yeah. So this was an idea that I had several years ago that Woodcraft implemented, whereas most yokes, this is a Lee Nelson plane. I can never get that thing out. If you look at the shape of the yoke, it's kind of like a big fat V. Okay? If you look at the shape of the yoke on a Stanley, it too is kind of a V. And one day I was thinking about it and I thought, I noticed that the bronze was all scraped away on either side of the yoke. And then I realized, well, that means because every time you adjust that, where that yoke is engaging is on that inside sharp edge right there and there. So not only are you moving it, but you're actually scraping metal, which is adding to the friction. And I thought, what if you were to shape that yoke like so that this round surface and that round surface would remain tangent to that inside flat area on either side of that spot inside the chip breaker. And they went ahead and did it, made that change. So that's been a really nice improvement. This is all sitting in what's called the frog. This 45-degree surface is what supports the blade and presents the blade at a fixed angle of 45 degrees to the wood. These are called frog retaining pins. They hold the frog firmly to the sole of the plane, and because they're accessed from the back side, now this is unique to the bedrock style plane, because they are accessed from the back side, which, by the way, another nice thing about the adjuster, it allows you to engage that screw directly instead of, in this situation, you're having to try to work around that adjuster knob. But now you can get in there. That center screw you use to move the frog assembly forward or back, depending on whether or not you need the ability to control any tear out. And to do that, you close the throat down so that the gap created between the edge of the blade and the trailing edge of the sole of the plane right here is minimal, meaning just the thickness of the shaving. Okay, this is the rear handle, or more appropriately known as the tote, T-O-T-E. This is the front knob. There were typically two styles. There was a tall and a low knob, and I have some examples, but I just don't have them right here. So you'll just have to pretend. This is the sole of the plane, the main body. It's made out of ductile iron. It should be flat and square. And I think that's all the parts and pieces. Next.
All right, this next question comes from Milo.
Milo, where's Milo?
He's in the chat, so doesn't say where he's from.
Milo in the chat.
I often have a difficult time getting very fine shavings consistently. I can get shavings about 5 thou thick, but difficulties being consistent around 2 thou. Any tips?
Yep, sharpen. Milo, here's what you need. Now, I don't care if you take this as a sales pitch. You ask the question, I'm going to give you the answer. You need what I use. Why? Because I use the very best stuff. You have to understand, this makes all of those tools work. So the better this is, and the better you are using it, the better all these tools will work. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, the sharper the chisel is, the easier it is to push through the piece of wood. The easier it is to push through the piece of wood, the more control you have. And we all know the more control you have, the better will be the result. That goes the same with planes. So you go out and you buy the apprentice kit. Go on our website under kits and bundles, find the apprentice kit. It includes the Trend diamond plate, which is a double-sided steel plate that has industrial diamond adhered to by nickel on both sides. There's a 300 grit side and a 1000 grit side. You start your sharpening process on the 1000. You finish the process on your 16,000 grit Sharpening. This is two pieces. The heavy holder. Don't buy the kit if you're not going to buy the holder, because it will not work as well as you think. This is the 16,000 grit stone. You use the 300 grit side of the diamond plate to keep that ceramic stone flat. You don't have to worry about this one. The only thing you have to worry about here is don't let it rust. That's why you want to use a product called Hone Right, which is what's in here. It's kind of a green liquid that you put into water. You buy this little bottle, and that little bottle will make 6 liters or 1.5 gallons, and that inhibits water from rusting metal. So the 300 grit side you use to keep that stone flat. The 1000 grit side is the side you start on. The apprentice kit also includes a 6000 grit stone, so that when you're preparing the backs of your chisels, because you want the back of your chisel to be polished and flat. Polished so that it can get sharper, flat so that it'll be very predictable when you use it. This is a one-time process, but you cannot take that big surface and go from 1000 to 16. Can't do that. You got to go 1000, chase those scratches away with something a little bit finer like a 6000, chase those scratches away with something even finer like a 16,000. There's a more expensive kit that makes that process even easier, but that's probably the one that most people are going to gravitate to because of the cost. That's your kit. Now, the question was that you can't get consistent shavings. If you are sharpening properly, you should be able to get 1/2 thou shavings on a piece of maple without any effort. If a 5,000 shaving is what's standard, then I'm going to suggest that your blade is not as sharp as it should be. Why? Well, if you were to look at the edge of a blade microscopically, what?
I'm going to go on a limb and say that his problem is that he went over 45. And that's why it's not consistent.
I don't think so, Jake. I don't think so. Let me finish this theory. If you look at the edge of a blade microscopically, no matter how sharp it is, it still actually has a radius on that end. And the less sharp it is, the more pronounced, the larger that radius is going to be. So in order for you to engage the wood, you're going to have that blade projecting. The duller it is, the more you got to project the blade in order for it to even engage the wood and not just right over the top of it. The sharper it is, the thinner shaving you're going to be able to produce, because the smaller that radius is, if this makes sense. It's always the key, sharpness. You've got to learn how to sharpen. So you need to go and watch 32 seconds to sharp. You got to watch it 100 times if you need to until you get it down. But if you're going home and trying to apply that technique to some piece of crap that you've picked up at a hardware store somewhere, it's not going to work. It's going to be a very difficult time doing it. Get the right tools, apply what I teach you, and you will be able to do it. We teach every student that comes to our class, and in the first day, they get this. And that's why they go home happy, because they've learned how to sharp. We have guys that come to us Monday afternoon and said, Rob, I could leave right now and say I got my money's worth because I finally learned how to sharpen. That's the key to sharpening. Get your kit. If you're still having a problem, ask me. Go on our website and pose the question, and I will address it personally and find out if there's something else. But I'm working under the assumption that as many times as I've seen this, it's always a sharpening issue. Get your right kit, watch the video, and then just duplicate the results. Next, Frick.
All right, next one comes from Rick Crow, who's also in the chat. He says, what can be done if the base of the plane is not perpendicular to either side of the plane? My number 5 Wood River sides and bottom form a parallelogram. Can I use some coarse sandpaper to get to 90 degrees?
So every once in a while we find this. Ken, how many times out of a 10? Be honest. 3 out of 10? So here's what Rick is saying. The sole of the plane, I've never of all the planes that we've sold, I haven't seen any that were flat. Now we haven't got it set up yet, but I just bought a big granite reference plate. It's 36 by 24. And I bought it used. They called me a couple days later and said, Mr. Cosman, we're sorry, we dropped it and broke it in half. Well, the good news is I can still use it because it's 18 by 12 now instead of 18 or 24 by
18 by 24.
18 by 24. Anyway, and I got it for free. I just had to pay for the shipping. But when we set a plane on there, and we can take a piece of 1 thou shim, and it'll move the plane everywhere, meaning that blade, that sole is flat. Now the sides, in order to use this effectively on a shooting board, the sides need to be square to the sole. At least they need to be within the tolerance that the company states, which is 1.5 thou. If it's out 1.5 thou, you can adjust for that a little bit on your blade, and you should be fine. If it's out more than that, you got to fix it. Now, what we do, we're set up to do this. We've got a big 16-inch disc sander, and we put a special disc on there for cutting metal, and we set that up so it's perfectly square, and we'll run that side to side. Even though it's a 16-inch, we can use both sides, and we will square up those sides so that they're right on. Then we get rid of the scratches, and it's good to go. So we have a prep service. And this is not unique to Wood River. I dealt with Lee Nelson as the rep for them for 7 years, and occasionally it would pop up there as well. So you just, I wouldn't say buyer beware, but you may not find it to your tolerance. Our service, and unfortunately it's only available, it's available everywhere except in the United States, because I have an agreement with Woodcraft whereby I don't sell their Wood River planes to anybody in the U.S. Long story, but just take it for that. However, our prep service includes doing all of that preparation so that that plane comes absolutely ready to use. What are you going to do? Oh. Whew. It's actually, if you're set up, it's not that hard. I mean, Ken does it all the time whenever he has to. What am I going to tell him?
Well, you could never do it by hand. You need to just.
I don't know how you could do it. If you can, well, let's walk over here. I'll just show you what we do. Can we make it over here, Jake? Well, here, come right here, because I gotta sander right here. So, if you had a disc sander, you could even use a 12-inch. First thing we do is we go in and we make sure that this is square. And this is a nice disc sander. This is made by General. You gotta make sure there's no grit on there when we're using that thing, you guys. We put tape on the bottoms to protect the sole of the plane. And we'll set that in there like that with the machine running, and we will run it forward and slide back and forth, back and forth. Now, when you're using a disc sander, you should only be using the side that's coming down. So from here over. If you put your piece of wood into here, it's going to fly up on you. So you got to be aware of that. So we hold that firmly. You also have to be aware that this all works because of rim speed, meaning it doesn't move very fast in here. So I wouldn't be taking very much wood off the end of my finger right now, but if I moved it out here, where the outside diameter is spinning much faster.
Do you often take much wood off the end of your finger?
Not very often. I try to keep them round instead of square. Okay, so when you're trying to, if we were just to hold it right like this, we'd be taking a lot of material off of there and very little off of here. So that's why we're moving it side to side like that. And you'll just see. If you're taking material off of here, then you know that you're out of square in that direction. And you just keep working it until your scratches are uniform from end to end. So I think you could even do it. I mean, 12-inch disc sanders are fairly common. If you can find somebody that has one, you might need to volunteer to pay for the disc because wood discs are not designed for using metal. We use 120 grit. 120 grit. And it doesn't take long to fix. Doing it by hand, I can't imagine sitting there with a piece of sandpaper and some kind of a square setup and doing it, but if you had to, you probably could.
Take it to a machine shop.
You take it to a machine shop, you might be better off mailing it to us. Machine shops aren't cheap, and there's going to be a blanket fee, and then they got to get set up to do it too. And
Yeah, somebody just asked that question in the live chat.
what?
They could send it to us for the West.
Are we ever going to do that? Jake's behind the camera shaking his head. By the way, just a quick introduction. You know me, I'm Rob. Jake is right here. Spin the camera around so they can see you.
No, we shouldn't do that.
Why?
Because we're not supposed to do that.
COVID thing. Anyway, so nobody's here. I'm here by myself.
We are socially distanced, though.
Yeah, we are socially distanced. We try to get as far away from Frick as we can.
That's normal
Yes.
without COVID.
Especially when he puts that T-shirt on.
Yeah, that's right.
We did have a request for another.
Oh boy.
Always do.
We're starting to adopt some
I got
of those
fans.
strange.
I got fans.
Yeah, you can keep those.
Somebody asked for a naughty girl.
Yeah, that's right.
Somebody wants one?
A particular one.
Pardon me for
It's not as cold in here, though, tonight.
drink
so-
in front of you. I just had to wet my whistle. Don't forget maple syrup, maple butter to make Christmas and the holiday season even sweeter.
Paul Morrison is on it.
Paul will be home soon. Is he home? Paul,
No, he's not home yet.
right here. Commander Paul, Lieutenant Commander, Canadian Navy. He's been down working in Australia, and he's almost done, so he'll be home soon. Welcome home, brother. Let
All
us
right.
know when you get there.
Next question is from Bill Tiffin in Edmonton, Alberta. He says, are there any times you would sand before finishing instead of straight from the smoothing plane?
Yeah, if there's any kind of a radius, any kind of a shape, pretty hard to sand, pretty hard to plane that. So that's when I do have to sand. But typically, now here's an example. Here's an exception. We just finished this, which I'm in love with. One of my favorite projects. And when we were doing this top is veneered. So in order to keep this nice and flat, too risky with a solid piece of wood that wide. By the way, you notice the wood hinge? So this top is a piece of 1/2-inch MDF. I took the piece of MDF and I glued on a solid strip of cherry along the end, the edge, the end, and the edge in here. Then I sandwiched that in between two pieces of cherry veneer. So there's a piece here and there's a piece here. And yeah, it's pretty thick veneer. It was a 1/16 of an inch thick. And I was trying to get a great surface right off of the hand plane. But you can tell from this shape that half of the grain is running this way and the other half is running the opposite way. And no matter what I did, I could not get a satisfactory surface. So I resorted to sanding this. But this came right off of the hand plane. This came off the hand plane. This came off the hand plane. Everything else came right off of the hand plane. Surfaces. In case you've never seen this is called a standing desk. So if you were to think of a lumber yard back 50 years ago, where the guy who ran it would be constantly up and down all day as people would come in, he'd take them out the yard, get them what they need, come back in, write up their bill, and away they'd go. Instead of jumping up and down out of a chair, he'd have a standing desk. So these little slot things move so you can have your paper sitting in there. You have a little lip here to hold your stuff. You open your lid. And that's the wooden hinge is just a little fancy thing. We did the inside with some molding in there so it made it easier to get stuff out instead of going into a corner. You have a little fillet there. Then we have 3 drawers here. And the whole idea was to hide them in plain sight. So instead of having handles, we just have a little thing where we reach up underneath. Finger goes up in the right, catches that little V on the bottom, and that's how you open the drawer. Now, out here in the front, we also have 2 drawers. This is your cash drawer. So there's a little trap door underneath here, allows you to put your finger up in to pull that door open. Again, whole idea was to avoid having to have any kind of handle out here. Problem with handles is they often will date a piece. You walk into somebody's kitchen and you can tell what year it was made based on the handles. So this was the money drawer. So change here, and we shaped this piece of cherry so that you could get your change out.
We consulted a cashier too.
We did. This piece is all dovetailed together, but it'll come out if you want to take it out. It's not permanent. And then over on this side, this is where I keep all of our stationery. Pens and pencils here, letters here, business cards, writing paper, envelopes. But the guy over here is going to need access to a pen to sign whatever document. So we had to have a place to keep his pens. So again, we didn't want to have handles. So what you do, your drawer's open, you reach underneath and you close your little trap door. And then when you close that door, look what happens. Out pops this little drawer. There's where your pens and pencils sit. Close it when you're done. And if they're on this side, same thing happens. Close your little trap door, close it, and there's your pen and pencil. Isn't that cool? The legs and all the pieces are joined with through wedge tenons. The secondary wood is holly. Deck the halls with boughs of holly. 'Tis the season. Holly is a hardwood. Comes out of Maryland, actually, in the United States, where most of it grows. It's extremely white, beautiful wood, and lovely texture. And I decided to use that on all the drawer sides because it really shows the dovetail well. I also used it on the wedges of all the through wedge tenons, and I'll just tell you briefly in case you don't understand. So this stretcher comes all the way through this leg. The hole in this leg is called a mortise. But instead of it having sides that are parallel, the sides of the mortise are actually sloped in a V shape. So before I put this tenon all the way through, I made 2 cuts in it close to the ends. And those cuts went all the way from here down to here. And then because this V-shaped opening is narrower on the backside than the front, when you bring your tenon through, there's going to be a gap on either end. These white holly wedges are designed to be the same shape as that gap. So when you glue them in and drive them and glue them in from this side, and they eventually all become one piece because of the glue, you create an internal dovetail or a wedge that makes for a very strong joint. So you have through wedge tenons here and here and here. You had to change the shape here because you always have to drive your wedges perpendicular to the grain. If you ran them the other way, they would split the wood. So when you're dealing with a small piece coming in like that, you have to put in 2 little wedges instead of 1 big one, which is what most people would have thought you might do. Most people that don't woodwork, that is. Beautiful cherry piece. So thrilled to do that. Okay, how did we get off on that? I'm sure we have another question.
Sanding over planing.
Are you serious? That clock's been hidden? Oh. What are we saying? Question?
You want one more?
Yeah.
Just a second. I'm finding one that.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Trying to find one that's worded. No, Luther told me to look for one. Okay. When you do sand, do you wet the wood to raise the grain before final sanding prior to applying a finish?
No. But let me just share with you one quick little story about planing versus sanding, and it has to do with water. So I shot a video back in 2005 or 6 with a guy named Brent Rourke, who's a friend of mine locally that makes these boxes for gift stores from here to Japan. And when you make the box, this thin strip of wood is pre-finished, or in his case, he sands it, puts it in hot water, lets it sit. The hot water softens the lignin, which is the natural glue that holds wood fiber together. When it softens, and then you bend that around a form, when it dries and the lignin re-adheres, if you would keep that, it helps keep that wood in that bent shape. Well, when Brent does them, he sends those thin strips of wood through a thickness sander. So we're normally accustomed to thickness planers that cut the wood. A thickness sander sands the wood to thickness. He puts it in, takes it out. Once it's dried, it's all fuzzy. So you got to go in and resand it. It has to do it twice. When we did the video, every time he did a power tool operation, I would try to do the same operation with hand tools. So I took my thin strips of wood, I put a piece of double-sided tape down because you couldn't plane up against something, you had to have it here, and I planed the wood, and he kind of rolled his eyes like, whatever. And when I was done planing the wood, it had a beautiful feel to it. Put it in the hot water, did the whole thing, but when my wood dried, it didn't have to be sanded. It was as smooth as it was before we put it in. Big advantage. So you don't raise the grain off of a plain surface like you would off a sanded surface. But no, I don't do that, and I really try to avoid sanding at all costs. That's an awful long story to answer your question. I apologize.
All right. Say your final remarks, and we'll do the draw.
All right. How many planes are we giving away? Thanks to Santa Claus. Santa Claus, I got to tell this story the next time we do this too, because we get surrounded, we attract these most incredible people. Santa Claus and his wife, Mrs. Claus, hello, and I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving. You told me you did. They generously pay for the most of the stuff that we give away each night, and he has helped me tremendously over the years with getting the Purple Heart Project started and just making us so we can do what we do. How many are we giving away?
We're $150 short of 3.
So if somebody wants to donate a total of $150, that'll allow us to give away 3 block planes tonight. We do one for every $1,000 increment. That money goes towards our Purple Heart Project, which is all involved in teaching these vets. And if that comes in, we'll do it. We're also going to give away tonight 3 sweaters. The Dead Cat sweater, which if you're cold, you got to get one. The captain is always right. And the naughty girl that will come with an autographed picture of Frick wearing it in full color, full size, Frick?
No, undersized.
We'll leave it indent 2 spots on the picture.
We won't need to.
I'm just going through the draw names here, deleting the duplicates.
So
All right.
try it.
How many people do we have on tonight?
We have 876 right now.
876 people. We're going to give away 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 gifts. That's pretty good. Don't forget to get your maple products. This is a local company. They make the best maple syrup. Just go ahead and read the reviews. You'll see. It is the best tasting maple syrup. It's dark maple syrup, and it is rich. Now, while they're doing that, I want to tell you one more thing real quick. In 2 weeks' time, we are going to have another Luther documentary recognizing and honoring a living World War II vet. This man has a story that you are going to want to hear. It is incredible. He and his wife, I hope, are going to be make cameo appearances on our on the show, and Luther is doing another bang-up job. And if you didn't see, I should mention, I hope Herman's on tonight. Herman, pronounce it, Jake, because you do such a good job.
It's a DeMio.
It's a DeMio. Herman DeMio, World War II vet, landed D-Day +4, fought through the hedgerows of northern France, was captured, spent a year as a POW. He and his 3 brothers all survived the war, and we had the pleasure of having Herman on. Spoke to him just recently, gave him a little tour of the shop. We made him a little wood hinge box out of Bastogne walnut to keep his Bronze Star in. You got to go in and watch that episode. It was filmed the middle of August, October. Hopefully we can leave a link into it so you can see it. No, it's a surprise. Thank you. All right, what are we doing?
All right. Okay.
How many are we giving away? Megan?
2.
Now let's give away 3.
I think your microphone died.
My microphone died?
Yeah. You want to give him yours?
When, just now?
Yep.
Okay. Well, we're going to give away 3 regardless, even if we didn't get the 3,000 increment. So let's do them. Let's give away. Since Frick's doing it, let's start off with the Naughty Girl.
All right.
The Naughty Girl teal, and you have your option of either teal or gray.
3 anyways.
Pardon?
We just got it.
We got 3. Thank you, folks. And if you're winning one of the garments, when we contact you, or you contact us, we find out what size you need so that we can get you the right size. And if you want it yourself and you don't win it, you can go to Pat's Secret Garden. Website will be in there, and you can, and Moose will send you one. And if you want your wife or your daughters to love you, get her a Dead Cat sweater. I promise you she'll love it. What?
Oh, Mrs. Claus sent a message. She said, "'Tis the season. Here is the $150 for the 3 planes, plus another $1,000 to make it 4."
Oh, wow.
So thank you, Mrs. Claus.
Oh, Santa Claus. You make me smile. So we're giving away 4. He says, he always, they sit and watch it together, and he has to keep her from over-donating.
All right, let's go. Prize number 1, Naughty Girl. Tonight's Naughty Girl is Dave Godson in Lincolnshire, UK.
Oh, Dave, cross the pond. That's good.
Prize number 2 is the Captain.
Captain's always right.
That might not make it across the board. Contraband.
Tonight's Captain is Robert Hamill in Wisconsin.
Hey, Robert, congratulations. Who's getting the dead cat?
Tonight's dead cat is Dana E. Mattern from the United States. Doesn't say where specifically.
Dana, enjoy it. I'm telling you, your wife will love you, but you get one for yourself. I have one for me. That's great. Okay, first of the 4 block planes.
Okay.
This is what you're winning, by the way. This is the Wood River version. Nice thing, it has the snap cap. What's really nice about it has an adjustable throat. Loosen the front knob. Adjust your throat like that. Tighten it up again. The nice thing about it is you can just pop your cap up just enough so that you can go in there and make your adjustment and then snap it back in place. Very comfortable to use. Always the low angle. You don't want the standard angle.
All right, I already pressed the button. So the winner is Brian Maynard in Virginia.
Hey, Brian, congratulations and Merry Christmas.
Number 2 goes to Zach Halliday in Lahinch, Ireland.
Zach in Ireland. Congratulations.
Block plane number 3 goes to Ira Matheny in California.
Ira?
IRA, yeah. Ira?
Ira.
In California.
Congratulations, Ira.
And last but not least, 4th block plane goes to Jens Grames, United States.
Hey, Jens, congratulations. Now, if you live in a climate where you have to worry about rust, we have these things called plane sacks. It's a silicone impregnated tube sock. There's 4 different sizes, and you just put your plane in when you're done. You don't have to worry about wiping oil off it every time you use it. We used to use it when we traveled and did the wood show circuit, and we never had a problem. You can get that on our site. Thank you to Luther, who's out in Southern California. Does a tremendous amount of work. We love you, brother. Thank you to Super Dave in upstate New York, who, as I said, will soon be part of our, even more involved part of our team. We'll talk about that more. Thank you to Ken, all the other people that are home helping us. Seems like you're here with me.
From Zoom.
Okay, and all the vets that are here, if we don't see you in 2 weeks' time, have a Merry Christmas. Love to hear from you. See you.